Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Finding Nemo. Let's dim the lights and eat some sushi.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Dunn and Duffy Circus. Come for the rhino, snakes, and lion. Stay for magical caboose and popping corns. Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We like to pick apart films in the fun way, not in the, mean-spirited way. See what we can learn. And sometimes it's good and bad. It's not always like we just are here to serve and open mouth, amazement at everything everyone does, because sometimes things don't work for us, and we try to call that out. And also learn from it. Like, why do we think it didn't work? Not just, oh, that's crap, and that's kind of the end of the sentence. That's not very interesting nor enlightening, nor is it kind of honoring the creative process. And as artists ourselves, we do want to honor that process. But it's a funky one. The last couple of intros, we've been talking about originality, and how sometimes it's okay to tread old ground, because ultimately there's only so many stories out there. And usually the originality is going to come in through your voice, as you said, adding more of you, not necessarily just creating something and rehashing it. The more specific you make it to yourself, the more it'll stand out as its own thing, even if it's the same general idea. Now, we said that, and then this a few days ago, I go to IMDb to check whatever stuff all the time. Oh, who's, what's Jodie Comer up to? I've been watching this final season of Killing Eve, and I was like, oh, she got anything else coming out? And so I hit IMDb on a regular basis, and every once in a while I'll watch a trailer. There was a new Shyamalan trailer out, and like most people, I have a love-hate relationship with him. And I watched his new trailer, and I'm like, wow, oh, this is eerily similar to my own story. And I think anytime, as a human being, really, but because we all come up with stories, right? In our own right, we always tell jokes or stories. And so whenever you hear someone, what you think is repeating your idea, you feel like, oh, someone stole that from me. That's kind of the knee-jerk reaction. So I'm watching this trailer, and it's got like all the same setup of a story I wrote, a couple of years ago, and have, passed around a little bit on the interwebs. And so I'm watching this trailer, and I'm like, oh, he got my idea. He took it. And it's so absurd. Like, Shyamalan has no need to steal from some random dude in Texas. He's got so many ideas of his own. But that's, I think, a very human reaction, is to see your idea coming from someone else's mouth and just assume they took it from me, my precious. And so I'm watching this trailer, and I'm just upset, because even if not, it also means that, once again, I'm not treading my own ground. I just feel like, oh, I'm going to be second to the buffet again. And I'm flustered. I'm a little frustrated. And so I just start diving in. Like, did he write this story? What's the backstory on this thing? Because even if it would be amazing, let's say he did, like, he would have had to have gone through some really impressive lengths to crank it out in that kind of timeline, because it would have been a year ago when he could have first seen it. And then it would have taken him like a week to write his own version, right? Make some tweaks, make it his own, and then immediately go into production so that he could immediately go into post-production. I mean, this whole process usually takes a year and a half, 2 years of making any film, let alone one of the quality that he's going to put out. Even if you don't like his stories, he puts a lot of production value into it. And so it's a very lengthy process. It's just absurd. And so I'm just talking myself down a little bit. And so, but along the way, I discovered that this was based on a book that came out 2 years before I even thought of my story. And so it kind of just goes back to the heart of there's nothing new under the sun, right? Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. And at the end of the day, back to your point originally, was you have to make it your own by just making it about not about you per se, but just about your vision and your ideas and your taste. And so I don't know. I saw all the ingredients of his new film, this kind of apocalyptic scenario, 2 men and a daughter in the woods, and a weirdo comes out of the woods and starts making these threats. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so much the story I've been working on for 2 years. I don't know.
But it's not.
Yeah. You just watched the trailer. How did this strike you?
Yeah. Initially I thought, oh shoot, here we go. This is, but it's not the story. And not even close. Yeah. I think there's so many wrinkles just from the trailer that are different than your story that it's no contest. But I will say that this is a kind of situation where it's easy to look at it like, oh, I'm scared. But really, it should be not flattering, but exciting that you're onto something. That's how I like to look at it. Cause we had the cycle of vampires, we had the cycle of werewolves, we had the cycle, it's this cycle of dread, right? Of kind of ethereal feeling of dread that I feel like we're in right now, which is a perfect time to make what you're making, to make your film. Because a lot of that it's poignant to today. And if M. Night comes out and he's making something like this, that's saying something, because I feel like, I don't know, he gets a bad rap, but I feel like he's very good at what he does still. And yeah, you can say storytelling, but his filmmaking is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And so for him to pick a film like this to do, based off of a book that was written a few years ago, I think that's a good sign that your story, which is still uniquely you, from everything that you've sent me, everything that I've seen out there, I feel like it's still different. And not just because it's you, but I think that the story itself is different, and it's not exactly told in the same way. So I would look at it as like a positive of like, oh, I'm onto something, rather than is that my story? No, it's definitely not your story.
Did I lose my voice because someone else is kind of treading the same ground? Right. That's kind of the fear that creeps over you.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
I think you're right though. I think, these things come in waves. And while the stories that, he and I are probably telling are going to be not a huge wave of that, but I like what you're talking about, this kind of existential dread kind of creeping in, and lurking around the corner, so to speak. That's interesting. And even if, we still had 90% of the same story, it's still going to feel different, right? I'm not going to have, Dave Bautista, right? Unfortunately. But it's everything's going to be different. The budgets are going to be wildly different, let alone the actors and location and, what we're doing behind the camera, what we're going to do with the score. It's all going to be completely different. The lighting, just looking at the lighting, it's like wildly different from what I want to do with, the cinematography in my film. And so even if some of the story beats feel the same, ultimately it'll live as, completely different things. We're not talking about Deep Impact versus Armageddon, right? It's where it's just kind of so broad and big budgeted, it kind of washes out a little bit. Even though obviously Armageddon is the better film. It's just
thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I bring this up just to, I guess, encourage people. Just because you see something that echoes something that you're working on doesn't mean you need to stop working on what you're doing. There's a lot of landscape, I was reading the subreddit, a couple years ago about someone who was like, man, I was working on a script about, 2 parents who can't conceive, who are trying to adopt. And I just saw this trailer on Apple Plus called Trying, for a show called Trying. And it's about 2 people who are trying to adopt. And so what's the point, of creating my script anymore? And everyone's like, it's fine. Like, you could count on, all your hands and toes and everyone in your household and everyone on your block, the number of procedural TV shows out there, right? We can have Law and Order and CSI Miami and CSI Mars or whatever. It's just, there's no end to some of these things. And it's okay, because ultimately you're going to tell a specific story with specific relationships. And that's what we're there for. We're not there for the big beats, even though we think we're showing up for a shark movie. We're really showing up to see humans interact with each other and deal with the situation in a way that's specific to them. And that is a story and the kind of things you need to be thinking about. What makes yours different, not what makes yours the same. And I think within that, there's a lot of encouragement.
100%, man. 100%. I mean, there's no way that someone can see inside your head and tell exactly your story. So yeah, don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Just do what you make, the film you want to see.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what are we doing today, man?
Today we're doing the classic Jaws. If you haven't seen this from 1975, I believe it came out, please pause this episode and go watch it. There'll be spoilers. If you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't seen Jaws,
it's one of those I think you're familiar with in the zeitgeist of film.
Yeah.
But probably I'd be surprised if that many people have actually watched it under a certain age.
Good
right?
Point.
Under whatever, 30 years old, and you're not a film buff, definitely haven't seen it. Over 30 and a film buff, probably seen it. Maybe if you're over like your early mid-20s, you've sat down to see it. But there's so many other films at that point to watch that I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people skip this, even though they know the music, right? I grew up to music. I don't know when I originally watched this. It was probably 15, 20 years after it came out. Because this came out before we were both born. So anyway, yeah, we'll cover a lot of things. We'll look at some of the cinematography using Day for Night, story and writing, Quint versus Cooper, the shark cage. And we'll also have some shark fun facts at the very end and other such stuff and things and stuff.
A quick synopsis of the film. When a killer shark unleashes chaos on a beach community of Cape Cod, it's up to a local sheriff, a marine biologist, and an old seafarer to hunt the beast down. It's directed by Steven Spielberg, screenplay by Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb. It's based on the novel by Peter Benchley, and cinematography by Bill Butler, featuring Roy Scheider as Brody, Robert Shaw as Quint, Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper, Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody, and Murray Hamilton as Mayor Vaughn.
You were on the Indianapolis?
What happened? Japanese submarine slammed 2 torpedoes into our side, Chief. He was coming back from the island of Tinian to Lady and just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb. 1,100 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about half an hour. Tiger, 13-footer. You know that when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail. What we didn't know was our bomb mission had been so secret, no distress signal had been sent. They didn't even list us overdue for a week. Very first light, Chief. Sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups. It's kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in a calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo, and the idea was shark comes to the nearest man, that man he starts pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
I thought you were going to let it keep going.
Oh man, I debated. I mean, it's a 4-minute scene.
Long.
Yeah, but that probably one of the best monologues in film history. Not just because it's really well written. The doll's eye remark is amazing. What a great line. I'll forever be jealous of writing something so simple and contrasting and perfectly logical. But also Robert Shaw is giving you the perfect quintessential sea captain. Yeah, I would assume that's where the name Quint came from. But his performance in this film is unbelievable. So it's been 47 years since this film came out. Does it still hold some scares?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it's mostly tense. I have a pretty intense fear of the ocean myself, and so I feel very much like Brody in this film. So I identify with him a lot, and yeah, there were moments that I didn't remember happened when the kid gets eaten.
Yeah.
I did not remember that. That gave me a visceral feeling that I did not like. I see the necessity of it in the storytelling, but it was hard to watch. But his absence of showing the shark for 90% of the film is what makes this film really great, right? I mean, if we saw the shark at the beginning at all, even a hint of it, right, then it might not be as scary. But the fact that we cannot see it, like we're not allowed to see it yet, was brilliant, right? It's very Hitchcocky, and what I would assume was a big influence for Spielberg would be Hitchcock. I don't know, but I would assume, just because the way that he chooses to shoot, chose to shoot his monster. And the dialogue is.
And sorry to jump in, but a large part of him hiding the shark had to do with how it was malfunctioning. The big mechanical shark that they had just wasn't working properly, and so they had to shoot around that quite a bit, is what I understand. And apparently it was also electrocuting the actors. so a lot of reasons, I guess, to hide it, but leaning into that, using these Hitchcockian ideas of imply, don't show, was pretty genius and certainly worked to his benefit. But sorry, the dialogue.
Yeah. So, and then I love how they hint to a lot of things before they show it. You know, the air tanks, Brody, be careful with the air tanks, they'll explode. He can't go down with 3 barrels. He goes down, the amazement, those kinds of things to show the strength of him ripping the dock away from those guys who are fishing for him off the dock. And that stress of him swimming back to the dock and barely getting up in time, but making it, I thought was really great. Like, because it would have been so easy for him to just be eaten, but no, let's have everybody be stressed and him actually get away. Oh, but in most cases in this film, they don't get away. That's a good juxtaposition there, I thought. And I mean, some of the things. So I think that Spielberg got better about this as he went on in his career. This whole assuming kind of thing, where did the T-Rex come from? Screenwrite or wherever. That he did more sparingly. He's done more sparingly in his later career, but early on, I feel like there were some liberties taken. I feel like in this film where it was just we'll just do this and it's assumed, and I feel like they were done too many times in this film where I I don't have a specific example, but that's how I felt. I felt several times like, where I tilted my head thinking, where did that come from? Or, oh, I know what he did. He did an assumption here, and it didn't. I think it happened like maybe 4 or 5 times in the whole film where it just happened. Things just happened without any explanation at all. And that's fine to do once, maybe twice in a movie, but multiple times, just kind of, it made me think about movie making rather than the actual movie itself. Do I love this film? Absolutely. Is it a seminal film? Absolutely. Is it a great example of a monster movie? Yes, absolutely. Do we feel good at the end? Yes, absolutely. Some of the dialogue is cheesy, but it is 1975 as well, and I feel like that drastically improved throughout his career. And but in this case, it was just like there were moments where I felt like I saw the filmmaking rather than felt it. But other than that, it's absolutely brilliant. And you're right, Robert Shaw makes this movie for me. Makes it, absolutely. And has so many iconic quotes from this film. It's just crazy. I mean, there are a lot, Brody had, we're going to need a bigger boat is brilliant. And oh my gosh, I mean, I always forget Richard Dreyfuss is in this movie. Yeah. I always forget it. And he's so good in it that there are just different. I think the brilliant thing about this is that there are different levels that you can identify with. You can identify with Quint or Brody or Hooper and get something different out of it. Hooper is the knowledgeable guy. He comes in, he knows the risk and he knows the issues and he has all the knowledge. Brody is, I don't know what I'm doing. This kind of like aloof, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm the chief of police. And so I've got to do something. And so he's the, take action kind of guy. Quint is the I have the real knowledge kind of guy, the street smarts, if you will. So you can choose to identify with whomever you want. And I think that's one of the things that makes this film so good is that you have that relationship with any one of those characters, and it can change. There are times where I felt more connected to Hooper, because I liked how funny he was at times, or how frustrated he was, like when he was really frustrated with the mayor for not closing the beach. That whole scene was amazing, by the way. That oneer, of them talking to the mayor
that leads in front of the big sign that's been vandalized.
Yes, exactly. And I also love how they made the shark gigantic, but not unrealistically gigantic. It's not like Megalodon or something like that. It's just a very, very big great white shark that's aggressive and smart. Okay, now we're in the realm of possibility. And so when you're in the realm of possibility, that's much more scary than when you're just, there's these gigantic monsters that, nobody has any proof exist.
Right. And it also doesn't move at insane speeds either, right? It moves like you would expect a shark to move. It's the size is realistic, even if it's beyond what we usually think of. Like I think the biggest great white shark we've seen is like 20 feet. And so this would have been 5 feet bigger than that, which is massive in reality. But whenever you're putting it up on screen, it's easy to be like, that's not enough. We need the 100-foot megalodon, that can swallow planets. You're just like, come on, man.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I would say. I would say it's great for 1975, and I think that there's a lot to take from it, and then there's a lot that it did first, but which is saying a lot. But I think that Spielberg got even better, as he went on. Obviously, we've done other films recently that I think are the top echelon of some of the stuff that he's done. So yeah, that's what I would say. I saw the filmmaking a little more than I would like, but I think that has a lot to do also with me doing this podcast with you. Whereas the last time I watched this film was probably, 5 or 10 years ago, and I probably just loved it and turn my brain off. And, I saw, so yeah. And I liked the lighting a lot in it, but there were some moments he just uses hard spotlights a lot and it drives me crazy. Like, just soften that shit. Really. There are some shots of, the boat driving away into the ocean where I can literally see a spotlight on the boat, or somebody's face. I can tell they're uplit. I can see the bounce on your face, because I can see shadows on your eyes. Like, I don't, who's paying attention to this? I try to keep in mind that it is 1975 and they are on on a lake or something. I don't know where they shot it, but, in the ocean, I'm not sure. But
I think they shot on location.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure lighting and camera is like much more complex, in a situation like that. But
it would also be interesting to analyze those scenes that you're talking about, which I didn't do for this episode. But to go back through and say, okay, there's uplighting here. Why is it motivated? And how does it make you feel? Because sometimes uplighting, right, creates a kind of a monster sitting around the campfire, effect of something's horribly wrong, and it creates a sense of dread on its own. And so I wonder if some of that would have been intentional versus we're just on a crunch right now.
Not in what I saw, because it was during the day, and it wasn't like.
I gotcha.
And also, if I could speak just a second to the music, that's always confused me. The music in this film has always confused the shit out of me. It's iconic, right? So like the donut is iconic. That's fine. And all the ominous stuff is fine. But in like the boat chase, there's this happy music playing and it makes no sense to me. I get, maybe there's a dichotomy here of like, hey, let's lighten the mood because we're in a boat and he can't get to us, kind of thing. But I don't want to feel that right now. I want to feel stress. I wanted to feel like something is gonna go wrong, but I didn't feel that at all in some of those moments where there's this happy music playing when they're on the boat and trying to catch Jaws. So this has always been a perplexing film for me musically. I think that the best part about this film is the main theme, dun dun, and the absence of music, which in that clip is a great example of that. And I know it's noticed that, oh my God. And I noticed, I was like, oh my gosh, there hasn't been music for like 10 minutes, what's going on, or 5 minutes or 6 minutes. Not what's going on, but, oh, this is important. We don't want anything to get in the way of this. And I think that's good filmmaking, but the music just drives me crazy in this movie. I can't do it every single time. We've talked about that, I think, before.
It's funny, because I totally understand what you're talking about. Like, they have the three buckets or whatever you call them, the barrels, and they're chasing them, and it feels like they're winning, right? And so they put in this light music that's almost like a fairy dust being sprinkled on the film, and there's certain scenes with like the xylophone kind of running up and down the scale, and I'm like, this is classic 70s filmmaking right now, scoring, and I don't know how to feel about it, because part of me really sides with you, like, oh guys, this, but at the same time, we both understand like this is, a different era of filmmaking, and there wasn't a ton of, electronic artists sitting around and creating brooding music. And it's fascinating from that standpoint. I would be curious to see this film rescored, with some of the stuff you're talking about, like focusing on the theme, focusing on the silent, maybe recreating some of the sound design, to hype up, some of the water splashing and the boat creaking, hitting that a little bit harder, because it's in there, right? That clip that we listened to a minute ago, you can hear the boat settling and moving and swaying, and maybe in certain parts where there's music, you could remove the music and just heighten everything with a lot more sound design to carry the weight. maybe not. I don't know. It would be interesting as an exercise. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about it because I caught this in theater actually last month. Alamo's been replaying a bunch of Spielberg stuff, coincidentally, and they had Jaws playing in 3D. And so I went and caught this in 3D, not the red and blue old school 3D, but like the modern. You have the shades on, gray looking, whatever. It kind of dulls the screen, but it actually worked really well. I wish I hadn't sat in the front row for it. The coverage isn't quite as good in your glasses for 3D front rows viewing. But even with that, like, it worked really well. I think it was that much more immersive. And once I settled into it, played beautifully. This is a gorgeous film to see on the big screen, very surprisingly. I've seen a pretty good amount of classic films in a theater, and they don't always feel right. But this certainly does. Like they clearly did a remastering at some point in the last 10, 20 years, and the colors look incredible. It's very sharp. They fixed any random scratches and film rings that might have been in the print. Yeah. Really, really impressed with it. And I was really surprised because I probably haven't seen this since I was like, I don't know, 10 years old. It's one of those films that you just kind of, you see it once and you go on about your business. And this movie came out, when my parents were teenagers. Like that's hilarious to me that society is still watching it. This is still going to theaters. They're pushing whatever 60, 70 years old. And here we are still watching the movies that on a big screen that they watched whenever they were kids. That's pretty cool and exciting to me. And even more so, like, Spielberg was, I think, 26 directing this thing. Crazy. Doing that on location.
I was actually doing the math in my head, like, man, how old was he? Yeah. So yeah. I said in my head, he had to be in his 20s when he did this. That's amazing.
That is amazing. My God. Yeah. And so for a lot of reasons, and then I think the production doubled or tripled from the original game plan just because of how many issues they were running into. There's a lot of fun backstories, which if you really want to dive into that stuff, I have a really fun recommendation at the end of the episode that will be just amazing to sit and listen to. But yeah, I love it. I think it works. I think that opening scene is incredible. It still plays perfectly. Like when she gets pulled under the water at the end of that scene in the middle of yelling, that feels horrific. And you never see a bite, you never see blood, you never see anything. It's just her rigged up to something underneath the water that's just yanking her around. Like, just incredible filmmaking, man. That's really, and then on top of that, like, I think if you were to just listen to that scene, you could hear the way the sound influences that whole sequence, because you have what's happening with her in the middle of the ocean versus what's happening to this random dude, she was about to hook up with, who's passing out on the beach. And you go from this really chaotic, noisy, cry for help and splashing to absolute silence of him on the beach, and then cut back, right? It really heightens what she's going through versus the help that's right there that isn't going to come and save her. Not that he could have, he could have got himself killed, but he wouldn't have done that. Like, the good thing to do is go and try to help. I think, I don't know best practices for shark attacks, but you don't want me in that situation, I guess.
No.
We're both dying or you're dying. I don't know which. TBD. I'm definitely not going to help. I know that, whatever I do. Yeah, but that opening scene is amazing. Like, it's perfect. So I guess we start right. We're on the beach at this campfire party, and it opens on a pitch black, so it's in the middle of the night. But as the scene kind of progresses, we see that we're actually kind of at dusk, right? The sun's kind of setting, and then we're doing a lot of day for night. And so whenever they get this wide shot of the campfire of him approaching Chrissy, that's day for night. And it's probably right at golden hour twilight, maybe. And that's the perfect twilight, if you can, is the perfect time to shoot day for night, because you have no hard shadows being created by the sun. If you fast forward like 20 minutes into this film, we're doing that scene that you talked about at the dock where where Jaws pulls the dock apart. Well, as they're setting that whole scene up, we see them reaching and setting up on the dock, and we have this shot looking at the pier and their hand tying ropes or something, and there's this really hard light being cast on the pier. Well, that's because they're shooting at 1 in the afternoon. The sun's right above them. There's no cloud, obviously no cloud blocking, and so you have this really, really hard shadow, even though it's supposed to be nighttime. It's supposed to be this day for night setup that they're going for. And contrast that with what you see at the beginning of the film, the campfire on the beach. That's day for night when we're looking at the campfire, but shot at twilight, because now you can let the campfire have some punch, right? Campfire isn't going to have any punch fighting against the sun. And so you can't light the cast, all your extras down there with that campfire if the sun hasn't set yet. And so you have to really pick your time of when you're shooting day for night based on what you're trying to get out of the scene. But even generally, without the campfire, twilight is perfect for day for night, so that you're not creating these shadows, and you'll kind of have a natural, soft ambient lighting across everything. And I haven't shot a ton, really any that I've used in a film, but I'll be shooting some for a project coming up, where we're shooting, in the middle of the day. You just got to pick your scenes, pick your time. If you can, you're going to be overexposing or underexposing the image by 3 stops, 3 stops, so that you don't blow out your highlights, because that's kind of one of those tells. And so you're doing a lot of things to kind of create this atmosphere that when you get into post, you can, desaturate a little bit, a lot more blue cast, remove a lot of red and green, so that it feels like moonlight is lighting everything, is motivating everything. And so, yeah, there's a trick to shooting day for night. And I think one of the best tricks is shooting at the very, very end of the day, preferably right as the sun sets. But it's hard because that's 15 minutes, 20 minutes of ambient light that you're going to get before you're screwed. And so do what you can, but rehearse. Yeah. Cool stuff. And then, okay. So from there we have the guy and the girl racing down the beach. The rest of the scene is day for night, which is fine. You need to be able to see into the landscape, and we still, you go watch Dune, they're still using day for night. Doesn't hurt anything if you know what you're doing. But what's cool about the rest of the scene is the way they use the girl. Not just how I was talking about, they use the guy to create contrast, but then they use the girl by stripping her down, right? She's naked. And what I love about that is it starts the scene into this sexy arena, right? We're about to see 2 people, 2 lovers, swimming, skinny dipping. And it's so good because nudity in this kind of situation invokes sex, right? It's kind of inviting to the audience, oh, here's something that you have no fear over, right? But soon sexy turns to horror, right? Because now instead of nudity being this kind of beautiful thing, it's now this vulnerability. She is completely exposed, metaphorically as well as literally. And it's just a great turn of the screw for the audience, because you go into this thing with, excitement. Although I guess, being Jaws, I bet this was kind of in the trailer, so you kind of know what to expect. But just assuming you've never heard of Jaws, you've never seen it, and you walk into this cold, there's probably a certain element of oh, this is cool. No, she has nothing protecting her at all from, a shark attack. And so it just feels a lot more grating to think about. And in a similar way, the kid at the beach that you were talking about is brutal. So the first 2 attacks that we have are on people that we can empathize very easily with, right? Women are very sympathetic on screen. Children are incredibly sympathetic on screen. You don't want bad things to happen to women and children, right? That's kind of the litmus test in film is, whether or not a murderer kills women and children. Like, and here we are at the beginning of the film. Within the first 15 minutes, we see a woman die and a child get mauled. And what I love about the kid being killed is it's both brutal, but at the same time, you don't really see anything, right? We don't see much. It's just kind of bloody water shooting up, and my God, does it shoot up? Like it's furious. It's kind of amazing.
We see 1 second of him being drug under.
Right. We have that close up of him getting pulled under, but there's no limbs, right? With the girl, we see some aftermath. In the morgue, we see an arm, but in the moment, we never see anything. And they kind of threaten for us to see the kid, right? Whenever the mayor is like, I'm not going to let you pull this, brutalized corpse of a child onto the pier and ruin everyone and upset the mother. And, we're not doing that. But also love about that attack is how it starts, because there's no big music cue. We kind of see a shot from the beach, and it's just the rolling of the shark and the tumbling of the kid in the raft. It's just this kind of, it's almost beautiful in how quiet it is. And it's kind of inviting the audience to like scream on its behalf. Right. And then right after that, like big music cue and big drama, everyone freaks out. It's pretty strong. And then from there, they don't really need to do anything else. I think the rest of the people who die from there are probably just dudes, right? These older guys.
The guy in the tiny boat.
Yeah.
What are you doing in a boat like that, dude? Seriously? And why are you bugging the kids?
Yeah.
Get away from the kids.
Get away from the kids.
Just get away from the kids.
Creep.
Yeah.
I love that shot though of for me, the scary, that's one of the scariest shots in the film. Yes. Is when you don't see Jaws surface. You see him just below the surface, and you see him kind of creep up, take a bite, and then slowly sink down, and he goes with them. That's an incredible shot, and it's terrifying because of its reality. You feel like that's probably how they're going to do it. They're not going to do some big bite, above water and splash around. Nope. We just snack. We do this all day, every day, and this is how it goes.
Listen, I live in the Bay Area, so there are great whites in these waters over here. So every time I go over the Golden Gate, I look out and I tell my wife, I'm like, there are so many sharks in the water right now. Every single time. And I have friends who are like, into triathlon out here, and they're like, come on, let's go do it. And I said, you have fun. You could not pay me to get in that water. I'm not even kidding. $1 million would not do it. Sorry about it. Everybody can laugh at me, but it is how it is. And it's because of this movie. It's because of stuff like that. Like seeing it, like they have one like you're talking about, big wide shot from above, which if you think about it, how did they get that? Were they in a helicopter?
Big rig, big boat. Yeah.
A big giant, well, it had to be pretty darn big because you don't see the boat.
Yeah, so, you don't see it. So there's a big crane. They probably had set up extended 40 feet or 30 feet, something like that.
Yeah. So if you think about it, the shark itself had to be at least 20 feet for us to think it's 25 or something. So it needed to have at least that width away from whatever boat that they're craning off of. Like that had to be a massive setup. And in 1975, this had to be the first time all of this stuff had been done, So yeah, super, that shot, you're right. It was exhaustingly
what else was amazing is that shot towards the end, at the very end, in the cage, and you have this
yes.
That's a real shark writhing around on top of the cage, flailing. And I looked that up. I was like, man, what is going on there? I got to know. So they shot that B team, basically another crew in Australia, where there's a lot of great whites that are 10 to 15 feet in length. And so what they did is got a smaller boat than the Orca. The Orca is the boat, Quint's ship. And so they get a smaller boat than the Orca to, create drama, a sense of scale for the 15-footer that they're working with out there, and a smaller cage. And they hired a smaller actor, a shorter guy, that they could put in the cage. And what they didn't know was that actor was scared of water. Like they got out there, he didn't want to go down, and so they had the cameraman out ready. They had the cage, and they set the cage down, and a shark goes up there, gets tangled in the winch. The winch, I guess, breaks, and the cage sinks. Falls
with the guy in it.
He never got in it because he was afraid. And they were like, saved his life. As his fear saved his life. Oh.
If you're not watching this, my mouth is agape right now.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's kind of wild.
Listen. I want you all to listen to me very closely. Do not let anybody tell you that it is not okay to be afraid of the ocean. Okay? I'm speaking to all of you out there who are afraid but are not wanting to tell other people because they will make fun of you or they will say, "Oh, it's fine." No. There are only a handful of places on this planet where you will get eaten as a human being. One of them is Alaska. The other one is anywhere in the ocean. Just keep that in mind. Okay. Thank you. This has been a PSA from Todd Sapio.
And the third is on a date with Army Hammer, from what I understand. No kidding. I have no idea what the whole thing is, but
I don't know, but it was
gotta
funny.
take your shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
That's really wild. You mentioned earlier that the other thing they talk about in the film, most shark attacks happen 10 feet from the beach and 3 feet of water. Not technically true. The most happen from 6 to 10 feet of water, depth wise. And then from there, I think it's like 10 to 15 feet is the next category of shark consumption. And then after that is like below 5 feet of water. And so it's there. The possibility's there, but
it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there.
For you, it's 100% guaranteed.
It's 100%. If I'm touching the water, I could be eaten. Just kidding.
Oh, that's so good. That scene though, where they're imploring the mayor, where you talked about that oneer, where we move from the view of the beach into that wide shot of the sign, the vandalized sign, where they're trying to get the mayor to like shut it down. I love that sequence, to your point. I love how static he is, right? He's very steady in the frame, while Hooper and Brody are just buzzing around him, just begging him, pleading him, and he is immovable, except when he feels like moving. So he walks and he brings us to the sign. He points out the sign. He's like, "This is what you need to be worried about, vandals." Like, okay, buddy, that's top priority, of course. But I love that shot though, because Hooper, towards the end of that conversation, is in front of the sign and he's discussing the proportions of the shark. He's like, "That's accurate. What you're seeing on that sign is accurate." And while he's talking about this, his head goes to the bottom of the frame. And I love it because it's like he's drowning. We're creating the frame as if we're looking at water, and his head is right there at the bottom. His argument is losing. He's lost significance. He's just trying to tread water at this point, to no success. And it's just a beautiful framing mechanism that I think, looks the part really, really well.
I could not agree more. I felt it.
Yeah.
I was feeling the desire to have the camera tilt down. Like, tilt down. I want to see him. And it never did. And then he walks even farther away. Yeah. As he's laughing.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? As the mayor leaves and he's laughing, he walks even farther away. So it gets even more awkward and feeling out of place, right?
And I love that laugh. It's such a great acting decision. I think the obvious choice there is to be upset and be angry. But instead, he laughs at how futile that whole conversation has been. And he's like, "I don't know what else to do. Like, all you can do is laugh." And
it's totally something I would do. Yes.
Oh, it's so good. Same thing. And that's kind of his character. Hooper is this kind of childish, character, because whenever he gets mad at Quint on the boat, right, he makes faces behind his back like a 10-year-old. It's pretty endearing in its own way.
I love it.
And on the boat, I love the way they're framing Hooper and Quint. like a lot of the time they put them on opposite ends of the frame, create this really huge gap between them until we're at night, they're at the table and they start comparing scars. And, you know, after a few scars, they kind of meet in the middle. Yeah. And it's so good because, you know, they start on opposite sides of the frame and of the table, and then they scoot in like, well, I'll drink to your leg, I'll drink to yours. And it's beautiful because they're now finally finding common ground, which is reflected in the frame, right? They're sharing the frame, they're sharing respect. Really, really clever. But ultimately, it can't last. And I think that's such a great decision, is even though they kind of have this good moment, it's not permanent. They're still who they are. And it's, you know, just a few minutes later that Brody is lecturing a captain on his boat about how to run his boat. Like, stop, don't push it any further, right? It's not gonna hold. And even though Hooper's right, the fact of just being challenged on his boat makes Quint go faster. Like, he immediately speeds up. Yeah. And it's just very telling of their characters and personalities. And you buy into it on an emotional level, so that when a boat breaks, you're just like, he told you are part of the characters at that point. You're not just saying, oh, this is movies trying to find a reason to break the boat. No, you're completely buying into why everyone is behaving the way they're doing. And you're also frustrated with them for doing it. It's beautiful storytelling and great performance from everyone around, for sure.
The characters themselves are all so necessary. I mean, imagine this, the scene you played at the beginning. Imagine if Hooper wasn't part of this film, and imagine it's just Brody and Quint in that room, and Brody asks Quint about his scar, and you don't have that reaction from Hooper when he says the Indianapolis.
Right.
Imagine that. The reason, like, it is such a great way of setting up a really important moment. Have awe from someone else in a scene. When Hooper stops laughing and gets freaking serious, and just, you can see him. I mean, he gives that long beat. It had to be like, I don't know, 10 seconds after he says the Indianapolis, and Hooper's reaction. It completely changes everything. All the air leaves the room, you know, where, and everything comes from this laughing, you know, high energy to just flat. And you're waiting for what's going to happen next. Like, you're told as an audience member, oh, we're about to get told something very important right now. So, but Hooper only knows that probably because of his experience as a marine biologist. He probably his experience as a shark lover. This is probably a famous story, and I'm pretty sure that this is a true story.
Mostly true. Yeah, the numbers are wrong. Like, I think the numbers are somewhere around 100 to 200 people were actually killed, but that's still a crazy experience.
I mean, can you imagine? And I think I don't know if it's from this movie or if it's just a natural feeling, but when Quint says the scaredest he was when he was waiting for his turn, that's exactly how I've always felt since I was a little kid getting out of the ocean. Of the scariest point that I have is not 100 yards from the shore when I'm swimming. It's the moment I reach the ladder to get out. And so it was very validating to hear that again, of like, oh yes, okay, I'm normal, you know, like that is a normal feeling. And I can only imagine what he felt like after, you know, his story of losing so many comrades or whatever in the ocean. So yeah, anyway, Hooper, I think, makes the setup for Quint's iconic
totally
dialogue.
Agree. And they keep him in the background of while he's delivering that monologue, so that we can still engage with his expression and his severity. It would have been easy, and it probably would have worked just fine having Robert Shaw in a single there, but by keeping, you know, Hooper reacting to it, to what Quint is saying, it heightens everything that much more. And I love how before he even tells him, right? Because Hooper makes that joke about, let me guess, mother, right? He's trying to guess what the tattoo on his arm was, and he just cracks himself up. And up until that point, Quint's been laughing along, and now Quint's not laughing. Instead, he almost pities Quint because he doesn't know what he just stumbled into. And instead of laughing or even judging him, he just gently reaches over and grabs his arm to make him pause just long enough to hear what he's about to say. Because the frustration, and it's such a good dynamic between Hooper and Quint. It's really fun, right? You have two seamen from different sides of the track. You have this rich kid, right? The city boy, as Hooper calls him, or as Quint calls him. But you also have this salty, sea captain, who's paid his dues and then some. It would have been really easy to make Brody the odd man out, right? You have these two seamen who are just, two of the same, cut from the same cloth, or whatever. Instead, Brody kind of becomes the negotiator between the two. And it's more interesting conflict with Quint and Hooper by seeing the way different sailors react and respond to each other. One's getting his stripes or whatever from the elder. But I love it, right? The dynamic there is so much stronger. And so whenever they're finding common ground at last, we have a sense of comfort. The laughter is that much louder. And then to your point, like that contrast hits when he starts quieting everything down. And now we really feel the silence because it was filled up so beautifully a minute ago with mirth, and now it's just quiet out of a sense of doom almost. Yeah, I love it. I love it too, because it plays really well with the shark cage because Quint has been mocking Hooper with all his toys and fancy gear, which it's pretty fancy stuff, like especially in 75. But even growing up, I wasn't like you. I didn't go on a lot of boats, but the idea of having a boat having cameras on it would have been wild to me, in the 90s, let alone thinking about that in the 70s. So yeah, Hooper's a pretty well-to-do, rich kid. And so, yeah, I love that it's mocked by Quint, right? It highlights their different, not just personalities, but philosophies about how to go about, taking down a monster. And it's also, the shark cage, a terrible idea. Like, you want to get underwater with the shark, like some little canned human shark treat. It's just really bad idea. But at the same time, it provides their victory, because that's the whole reason why the oxygen tank is on board in the first place. And so in every way, it's a great storytelling mechanism. It provides conflict between the crew. It provides a really fantastic visual, fear for the end of the film, the climax, while also providing the ultimate victory that gives them a chance of escaping this thing alive. What a great idea, and really good execution of it too. Yeah, just really wonderfully written film, I think.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the dialogue is actually something that people would say. I think that almost everything that Richard Dreyfuss says, like, I wonder how much of it was actually written on the page and how much of it was ad-libbed a little bit, because he's such an amazing actor. I mean, I can't even put into words how good Richard Dreyfuss is. Honestly, he's like one up there for me. And I think part of the reason is because of the naturalism he brings to almost all of his roles, really. And to the point where, if I were to sit down and analyze it, I can't imagine all of that being perfectly, like what was written on the page. I feel like he has to bring, so much of his own person into it. And it could, maybe it's just the way that he acts, and it's just with that kind of naturalism. But I feel like his actual dialogue is a lot of times stuff that I would say or do, or without it being written down. And that comes off really well for a character like this, who, he has a lot of knowledge, but like doesn't have as good of personal skills maybe as like Brody, right? And it comes off very, very well, very much like that.
I think it really comes down to the homework that he did for his character, because he sat and analyzed and said, who is this guy? The page doesn't tell you everything, but it gives you a lot of clues. For him, he said, okay, this guy is wealthy, so he grew up entitled. The idea that he had a boat to have been devoured by a shark speaks volumes. And the fact that he had money to build out this world-class research vessel says a lot. But it also says a lot that he cares enough about this stuff to spend his life doing it, And so he's probably been around enough sailors like Quint where he knows exactly what to expect. They're going to give him shit, and he's going to have to eat a little bit, but they're never going to respect him if he doesn't dish it too. And so he carries that chip on his shoulder because it's going to serve him. And so he's putting all these things into his character, so that whenever it's time to be on set, he knows his character inside and out. And yeah, he's going to laugh right here, or he's going to roll his eyes right here. Or it's like, oh, now I can prove my mettle. I got that scar beat, right? And I think you're right, man. It's just really good acting, but I think it's born out of a lot of research and thinking through who his character is, why he is the way he is, why is he saying this line, and where does that come from? And a lot of it's entitlement, right? Growing up wealthy, being entitled, and that makes it very easy for him to talk down to Quint. I think that's what's kind of hilarious, is every sailor also knows to not tell a captain what to do on his boat, but because he grew up the way he did, it's nothing to him to tell Quint, what he thinks and what he's doing wrong, right? That's gutsy. That's really gutsy. Yeah. But to him, it's second nature because of his background and because of the research that goes into that. He's going to lean into it. He's not going to shy away from it. It's not coming out of fear. It's coming out of supreme confidence and entitlement. Few fun facts for sharks. Some of these people probably know. I think one of these people won't. So the low hanging fruit here, sharks, very old, older than trees. Like trees, as a species, sharks have been around for millions of years longer than trees have been. And so the earliest trees were dated around 350 million years ago. Sharks have been around for what's estimated to be 400 million years ago. Unfortunately, we don't have any documents or recorded footage, but that's carbon dating and that kind of stuff. Wow. Based on where you find these, et cetera. Sharks are also older than the rings of Saturn, and that might be more surprising based on how long the rings of Saturn have been around, right?
That's crazy.
Because we think those rings on Saturn formed around 10 to 100 million years ago. And so, of course, shark got that beat by, a couple of weeks. And so the one that I think will surprise most people, though, the one that I learned this past week, was smell. Everyone's familiar with sharks smelling blood in the water, right? That's a phrase unto itself. They smell blood in the water. It's not even talking about sharks. You could be talking about whatever, a businessman. Oh, he smells blood in the water. You instantly know they're talking about sharks, and there's this predatory image that comes to mind. And so we're very, very familiar with how well sharks smell blood in the water. And the number is at 1 part per million. And so humans, on the other hand, can smell what's called petrichor, right? That's the smell of rain. It's part ozone and part another thing called geosmin. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But the idea is humans can smell petrichor better than a shark can smell blood, and not by a little. So if sharks can smell blood at 1 part per million, humans can smell geosmin at 5 parts per trillion. That means human noses are 200,000 times more sensitive to geosmin than sharks are to blood. Like that's pretty wild. Yeah.
It feels you threw out a lot of numbers there. I don't really know. That sounds crazy.
200,000 times. Yeah, that's a pretty outlandish number. I'll link both of those, all all those fun facts in the show notes so that you can inspect and guffaw at your leisure.
Awesome. That's crazy.
Any final thoughts on Jawsies?
Well, one thing I've heard, and maybe you can dismiss this fact, that if you see a shark, if like a shark is swimming at you, they have very sensitive noses, so try to punch it in the nose. That's what I've
send
heard.
them on their way.
I mean, obviously that's what you're gonna do. It sounds like an obvious thing, but there are you hear tricks about like if it's a black bear, you do this. If it's a brown bear, you do that, kind of thing. And they're very different. Like, I think like if it's a black bear, you got to run. And if it's a brown bear, you play dead or something. But like for a shark, you might not necessarily know what to do. But I've heard that you punch it in the nose because it's very sensitive and it hopefully will swim away.
Not necessarily from what I'm reading. So, despite this is from the New York Times, from circa 2005. Despite the old saying that aiming for the nose is the best strategy, a shark's most sensitive areas are really its eyes and its gills. Aiming for the nose, which is not known to be a weak spot, is generally considered a bad idea. Whatever, New York Times.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. See? Well, now you know. Now you know. That's what I always thought. See, this is as much as I know about sharks.
Same. No, I would give them the old karate kick.
Yeah. Listen, I don't think that sharks are out to just eat everybody all the time. I think they're a beautiful species. I just don't want to have any kind of interaction with them ever. So yeah, this movie, brilliant. So much about it is amazing and done for the first time ever. And I cannot believe that Spielberg was 26 when he made this. What an amazing feat this was. I mean, to last this long, there's still rides at Disney World and stuff, or at Universal Studios based on this film, and it's iconic and so well done in so many ways. So yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, I think it held the box office record for a couple of years before Star Wars hit, and then that decimated everybody. But yeah, agreed, man. The really incredible work, like iconic for all the right reasons. Yeah, loved it. So what are you going to recommend this week?
So I got to go to a Hitchcock film because he was king in so many ways, but I'm going to go with Psycho, the 1960 Psycho. And one of the reasons is because of the absence of showing a lot. Like, it was more of a feeling, than anything else. I think there's like one moment in Psycho where you see a knife touch skin. It's like very, the absence of seeing things is almost scarier than actually seeing it. And I feel like Jaws was very much like that for whatever reason. Maybe it was because the shark was electrocuting the actors. Maybe part of it was intentional. I don't know, but that's one of the reasons why I feel like this movie has lasted, because it's very much like a book in that it doesn't paint everything for you. You imagine it in your head, and you imagine it so much worse than it might actually be if you saw it, right? If it was handed to you. I feel like Psycho does that in a brilliant way 15 years earlier. So
nice. I'm going to recommend a podcast. It's called Inside Jaws. It's 6 to 10 episodes. And they basically tell the behind the scenes stories of what making the film was actually like, hurdles, hiccups. I haven't listened to it in a while. The one thing I will say against that podcast is you can probably skip the first 90 seconds or so, 2 minutes. They start every episode with a true life story of a shark attack, which is utterly stupid. I think whoever had that idea is an idiot. Don't do that. The rest of the show is brilliant. And describing people getting mauled by sharks does nothing to help tell the story of how Jaws got made. I don't know. I wouldn't want to hear, Fincher tell me about Seven only to recount every chapter with how someone got murdered in gruesome detail. Like, it's really stupid idea. And if that's not your bag, which it's not mine, in Jaws, I look away every time they open up that book and see the shark attack wounds. Yeah. I think killing the kid, the images in the book, I think those were very, very edgy for 1975, and I can see why they did them, because no one else was doing that probably, certainly not in studio films, and you want to push those boundaries. That's edgelord kind of stuff that works really, really well in 75. And 2022, post 2000, it's no longer edgy. It's like gratuitous and needless for the most part. And so picking and choosing how and when you do those things, like telling a story about someone getting eaten alive, should be done more carefully than what they did in that podcast. But otherwise, that's a really, really fantastic podcast. And I think it's really well executed, very good stories and worth listening to, just to see the kind of stuff that Spielberg had to fight through. It's really encouraging if you're a filmmaker to listen to something like that for sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Stay tuned next week as we dive further into creature features, when we take on Bong Joon-ho's 2006 Korean film, The Host. That'll be fun. I'm excited about that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review, subscribe, leave us a note if there's something you want us to talk about, kind of things you find interesting. Shout out to my man, you dropped us a note on last week's or 2 weeks ago, Munich's episode, left a really good comment. And yeah, if you want to leave a note on this episode, y'all can do that at the pestlepodcast.com/jaws.
And our quote of the day is from the infamous Jacques Cousteau. It is certain that the study of human psychology, if it were undertaken exclusively in prisons, would also lead to misinterpretation and absurd generalizations. You have to think about that one.
You do. It's like if you're going to generalize any one small specific population, you're going to walk away with some really bad ideas of what people are like. And you're going to, just generalize. So we think about sharks, right? No one talks about all the people sharks haven't bitten, Todd.
It's true. It's true. On a daily basis, I haven't been bitten. You're right. Right.
So it's pretty unfair to sharks to only judge them by Jaws, or random stories of shark attacks, because more often than not, they let us go.
Well said. I mean, the passing conversation in Interstellar when they talk about the universe or nature being evil versus just moving forward. I think that has a lot to do with this, right? Like, do I think that nature is evil? No, it just, things happen, good things and bad things, and good and bad is relative, obviously, when it comes to nature, and not a human decision, but nature. And I put sharks in that category of nature. Obviously, they just eat, they swim and they eat and they make little shark babies. Just like Hooper said, that's all they do. And so that's their thing. And if they're hungry and you just happen to be there, that's bad luck, right? It's just whatever, but it's not evil, right?
No, and it's also sometimes accidental, right? I love the shot of the kid on top of the water in the raft. Same thing happens with surfers, because to a shark from below, I think they mistake them for seals, right? Sitting on top of the water. And so they think they're getting a seal, and instead they're getting plastic and human, which are almost indistinguishable at this point, due to how much plastic we consume in the world.
I got it.
And so, I agree, man. It's nature, and bad luck happens. It doesn't mean sharks are thinking about anything. Like, they're just snacking. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Great quote. Puts it in perspective. This was fun. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Wes, for the insights and for keeping me straight on this stuff. And like Wes said, please subscribe, review us anywhere you get your podcasts. It really helps out. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think about what we've said, what's wrong with it, what would be better. We'd love to hear it all. And if you have a suggestion on a film, let us know, and maybe we'll cover it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
go watch some movie.
Yeah.